One of our biggest clients went from 54k in spend from this same period in October, from the 1st to the 8th, versus this year, the same period, 622k in spend.
Welcome back to another episode of D2C Diaries. Today I'm joined again by COO Sam, the man who wears many hats, operations, but also growth marketing expert, and excited to be talking a bit more about some of the recent developments we've been seeing in the agency around creative diversity. Recently had a tweet that we published go, I'd say like D2C viral.
D2C viral for sure.
Not quite viral in the sense of influencer, but yeah, got a lot of attention off the back of a couple of sessions we did with Meta. So yeah, looking forward to diving into that. But welcome back to
Lucas's reliable substitute back again. Not subjecting people to ops theory and AI this time. More tactical. Might even get in the weeds. So, looking forward to diving in.
More executional, which we love. So, and people seem to love those topics. Lucas will be back, I think. Definitely will be back in the next couple of episodes to go deeper into like how we're kind of coming up with new concepts and really leaning into these updates.
So you're running an e-commerce business, you've got a great product, your ads are finally hitting their stride, and then you look at the calendar and realize that Black Friday and Cyber Monday are right around the corner. But do you have enough cash to buy all of the inventory you need? Will you have enough in your ad budget to really maximize scale?
This is the exact moment so many founders hit a wall. They've tried the old school bank loan thing, weeks of paperwork and meetings, and then a rejection letter because their business is just too new. They've thought about going VC, but who wants to give up a piece of their company just to buy stock? That's what makes our partner, Waveflyer, such a game changer.
Waveflyer provides funding for e-commerce businesses just like yours, but here's the best part. It's non-dilutive. That means you get the cash you need to scale up, to buy more inventory, launch that new ad campaign, or hire a key team member without giving up a single percentage of your company.
And the process is incredibly fast. We're talking about a matter of days, not months. Their data-powered platform gives you personalized insights into your business's performance so you can make smarter decisions about your cash flow and marketing. Stop worrying about maxing out credit cards or getting bogged down by bank bureaucracy. Get the capital you need, seize the moments, and keep 100% of your business and get back to what you do best.
Check them out in the link in the description.
I think Meta have really redefined and brought to the forefront a new way of thinking about creative diversity that I guess we've been talking a lot about internally for a few months now. And you can certainly see in the accounts that we have where we're seeing compounding results in it. I think you mentioned in a session recently, the accounts where it feels easy to scale. I feel like we've been leaning into this maybe for many months now, but I think they've really codified it in some of these slides and some of these resources that they've brought to us over the last few weeks.
Yeah, it feels like those that are really leaning in right now have almost created like a bit of a power law, because they've done it for so long, the accounts in such like an optimized state where you're giving Meta so many different signals and it's just like compounding growth, and it gets easier to scale, but also becomes super predictable. When you start pouring more fuel into the fire, you can see it compounding over time. And I think there's a lot of fuel still left to be like squeezed. There's not many people talking about like the idea of just pouring more on, but thinking about what to actually pour. So a couple of bits that we're going to go into today, but for sure seeing those that invest, they just create a power law for themselves. It'd be interesting to get your thoughts on this, actually. Do you think there's like a window within the next like 6 to 12 months where you can really leverage it, you can really take advantage of what we're seeing?
Yeah, I still think, and I think the results we're getting on our the fastest growing accounts are testimony to this. I think Meta is as powerful as ever. Like brands we work with are getting better results than ever if they're really leaning into Andromeda. I don't want to rehash Andromeda in too much detail because we've talked about that and how it works, how it's been rolled out and what it means for the algorithm on Facebook in previous episodes. But I still don't think many brands are really like sitting down and thinking from first principles, how do we lean into this? How do we provide Meta with the creative-led signals to allow it to drive better delivery at your targets over time, and really thinking about how we get in front of new audience. And until recently, we hadn't really had any materials from Meta's internal team to sort of codify this or give us guidance on this. But recently we ran a couple of creative sessions with our reps who have been instrumental in helping us benchmark incremental reach and drive scale for those brands that are spending multi-six figures a month on platform, where it really does become a limiter getting in front of new audience, and how you think about that and how you KPI around that intentionally, which I think we're going to touch on a little bit further into the episode. But I'm going to surface on screen somewhere around our heads a slide that we shared on Twitter recently and LinkedIn, which is like a left to right scale for those people listening and not watching. On the left is they've identified less differentiated ads. So these are ads with a similar message and a similar visual style. So perhaps the same angle, the same visual, whether that's static or whether that's a UGC with very similar creator and very similar hook. And yeah, middle of this sliding scale is differentiated message, but same style. So maybe you're using a different script angle or angle persona, a combination, but the same sort of format. So similar creator, similar static. And then on the far right of the scale, you've got differentiated message and differentiated style. And I think that's like the type of asset and the type of deliverable that's really supporting incremental new reach.
That's a sweet spot to invest in, right?
Yeah, and I think that's creative diversity at its heart. It's like, how do we look at the building blocks of creative from message at the very bottom, like angle, which is, I guess, the foundation of any piece of content, all the way up to like the very tip of the triangle in terms of impact, which is like font, color, and like maybe even copy to some degree if it's in the same angle.
Minimal impact. No, I think copy. I see copy as the thing that users will check after they've been hooked in. So it's not that relevant. I see it more of a conversion lever than an attention and signaling lever. But yeah, right at the tip, like not much impact versus the bottom, which is very persona led. That's the most potent form of fuel, right?
Yeah.
Persona.
It's like finding a new angle is what can drive that significant step change in results initially. And then as you double down on it through further visual variety, it's like you multiply the impact of finding that new angle. And yeah, I think if we rewind like 18 months, many brands will have been making a huge amount of iterations across statics that maybe it's the same static format, the same angle, and just the copy presentation would be different. And that was working. And I still think that can work as like a leading indicator for like on a click-through rate of like what someone's interested in more, and maybe you double down on that. But it's not providing...
It's not going to drive growth.
It's not going to drive significant incremental reach and transform an ad account for a brand that's already spending it.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to like squeeze the juice, then yeah, maybe you can iterate on something small and more minutiae like copying a static, for example. But the thing that's going to make the big swing is, and the thing that also is going to almost create a halo effect on the rest of the account is going to be persona, mass differentiation, because you're going to be bringing so many more impressions into your funnel. It's then the statics and the small iterations that then might sweep up after you've brought in that net new reach. And you'll see that when you break it down and look at your new visitor percentage, your static is usually the one that's smaller new visit percentage, and your video where you've done a new angle, a new persona, that's the one that's driving more net new impressions to your website, but also driving your volume of incremental reach up over time.
Yeah, and I think this whole concept of like asset similarity is something that we've had. It's not something we've probably put as much thought into until recently. But we then did a second session for a client where Meta presented a batch of their top spending assets and side by sided them and gave us a rating of how similar those assets were. And one of the real standouts for me here was they highlighted two different UGC creators who were in a similar setting, both in a kitchen, both delivering a similar message, but they were two completely different individuals, and Meta had identified them as the same asset. And I think that really was like an inflection point in like, right, we need to be looking at this intentionally, because you can almost see those two assets as like the investment in creating those two assets, the investment in creating these assets that are seen as the same by Meta as being almost not worth it entirely, but far less impactful than spending that creative budget in different ways in the pursuit of greater visual diversity or messaging diversity.
Yeah, it's like what you said. What first principles? What's the variable that's likely going to have the most impact? Probably not the creator and how they look and feel, but it's probably the persona that is wrapped within that creative. What are the pain points that you're trying to dig into? What are like the emotional narratives? I see that all forming a really strong persona-led creative, and that's what's really moving the needle for us right now. It does feel like this needs to be almost a KPI that you look at on a day-to-day basis in an ad account, and if you give ownership, maybe a secondary KPI for like a creative strategist, for example, and just looking at it intentionally every day and making sure that your incremental reach is going up over time, I think is super, super important, and nobody's really talking about that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think they also gave a statistic that was like different motivators unlock new audiences 89% of the time. And I think that comes back to that angle and that persona-based approach to creative production being so important. And as you start to find that angle that works, it's like I almost see it as like breaking off into a couple of different work streams at that point. You've got this angle that you've found. It's like, how do we reskin that into different ways of presenting that visually and through messaging and through messaging, whilst also continuing to run another work stream that is focused on those bigger unlocks alongside that, because you are going to see the impact of that message or that persona dwindle and decrease over time. It's going to become less incremental as you feed more volume into the algorithm. Yeah,
I think the bottom layer of the cake is product. The thing that sits above that persona, you're going to probably have like, I mean, it depends on the TAM of your product, right? But if you've got a super big TAM, you might be able to get 12 personas out of the product, fairly broad personas. Within that, you might have, let's be optimistic and say 20 angles within each persona. You've already probably got like 500 angles there you could tie into across all those different personas. And then from that, you can think about your vehicles and your styles that ladder up to that angle. And when people say like, like what more can we do? It's like, I just fundamentally don't believe that when you actually do the math. And there's a multiplier effect for every single layer that works back from the persona. And you'll end up with the realization that you've probably got like 50,000 unique concepts that you could inject into account. And that's where prioritization comes in, of course. But yeah, there's so much opportunity when you break it down like that and create that pyramid layered approach, which I think you can really, every brand in my opinion should be baking that into their like research and insights, like getting into the rhythm of doing that maybe every 2 weeks, for example, and then forming your next steps off the back of that initial build that you've done.
Yeah, it's bringing that idea of like similarity back into that strategy equation, right? It's like making sure we're intentional with asset splits across the awareness phases, across the vehicles, across the angles, across the personas. And I think it does just introduce another layer of complexity. There's obviously been that a lot of conversation over the last 6 to 12 months around volume versus quality of assets, and it's often painted as like you need to like one or the other. Whereas I really think this is like a proof point that you really do need to figure out a way to do both. You need to figure out a way to retain hit rate and average spend per asset as you continue to drive volume and diverse volume across all of those different variables to maximize the platform, because it still is possible to get to mid 8-9 figures through very little channel diversification if you can lean really heavily into that way of approaching creative strategy and execution.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think there's so much juice to be squeezed out of Meta. When brands say to us, we want to diversify, it's like, let's look at the amount of diversification in the single channel that you're running, which is Meta, before we start thinking about extra channels. We've seen this happen, right? One of our biggest clients went from, I've got it noted down here, I think it was 54K in spend from this same period in October, from the 1st to the 8th, versus this year, the same period, 622K in spend, over 10x by just obsessing about persona and diversity.
Creative diversity that creates the signals for Meta to go and find your new audiences.
That's it, signals and like relevancy scores.
I don't think anyone's thinking of creative through that lens of signal engineering. Like, how are you providing Meta with signals? And signals for Meta Andromeda is engagement, it's watch time, it's hook rate. It's like a signal that a specific audience is conversion as well, but it's a signal that a specific audience is resonating with an asset that allows it to latch onto that signal and go and find similar people to those individuals and get in front of individuals you haven't reached before as a result of that.
Feels like signal-rich ads are almost like context, and your ad spend is like the prompt. It's like the output that you get from the prompt is only as rich as your context. Sorry to talk about AI. I had to.
It's looping back around. I like that analogy though.
Makes sense, right?
I think it's only going to, and the exciting thing is for brands, if they can lean into this, I think it's only going to become better, because they've rolled the Andromeda out. Like, if you think about its context window expanding, its machine learning getting more and more effective and efficient over time, you should expect the long tail of your ads, those outside of those real top performers, the impact of that long tail to improve as it's able to better deliver, if the quality of those assets is high enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. I think to make this practical for people need to, I know you've already on an episode with Lucas spoken about the reports and things like that you can gain, but you want to be benchmarking incremental reach and watching the volume increase over time. And as an expression of a percentage expression, it's likely going to decrease with scale, but as long as to a certain level, as long as that volume is increasing over time, then you are bringing new impressions into the funnel. I think 10 to 20% is where I've seen sweet spot, relative to brand size, of course. If you're dropping below 10%, then it's likely that you'll run into diminishing returns a lot quicker than other brands that are more weighted towards that 20% range. So I think that's a super key one to look at and request every month or so, which I know you've already touched on. Cost per 1,000 accounts reached is something that Cody has been saying on X over the past week or so.
Cody Plotk from Jones Road has been pushing this hard. It's like CPMR, right? Yeah. And it is a metric in Meta that you can pull. It's just CPM times frequency, really. And if you aren't able to get those incremental reach reports from your reps, because I know that's a bottleneck for some brands, we're able to through the great support that we get from the guys over at Meta. I think it's about building these proxies for like, how do you get a gauge on that, and that is a big one.
Yeah. Such a quick win. Add it to the ad account. You can see it on trend over time, and you'll see that if you've just injected a load of this persona-led diversified creative into account, you'll likely see that cost of incremental reach reduce that week. It'll probably level out as you saturate the impressions that are coming through from that creative. But yeah, I actually looked at this for a client and looked at it on a chart over the last month or so, and it did line up with every single creative sprint. It spikes and then levels out a little bit, and then it goes up and down. So yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, and I think the red flag is if you're pushing spend and the cost to reach 1,000 people is increasing, either proportionally or more so than that spend increase in percentage terms. I also think you can see that on an asset level. So you can look at it on an account level, but you can also often, when you find those real unaware, problem-aware asset unlocks, the CPM will be remarkably lower than an account average. Like sometimes can be like 5x, 5-6x lower. And that's just, again, a signal that it's getting in front of just such a vastly different audience, and it'll start to drag those through the ad account and across all of those other assets that may be lower funnel. So I think it's important to benchmark that on an account level, but also reviewing specific angles, specific formats, vehicles, and then you can compound that by reviewing whitelisting, which I think is another way to really drive better CPM. We're seeing that play out, aren't we?
Yeah, massively. Yeah, I think people need to look at that as though they do thumb stop ratio and click-through rate, just add it to your column mix and start looking at that on a week-to-week basis. Done some similar analysis with partnership ads. The learnings there so far are pretty limited. However, interesting to see. I mean, not interesting, you would expect click-through rate increases, and what that's doing, to your point, is giving more signals to Meta, which is creating better relevancy scores, and because of that, we're seeing conversion rate increases across a lot of partnership ads, which is something to do if you're not already doing. And quick little tactic there, we found the best performance come through like native Instagram static that looks like a story, and you pair it with the partnership ad, it literally looks like an influencer's story. That is driving like really cheap CPMs right now and super high click-through rates, and because of that, conversion rate increasing. Interestingly, we haven't seen it impact incremental reach as much as I thought, but I think that comes down to my hypothesis here is it's doing a really good job at like getting in front of the more stubborn audience pools that weren't otherwise converting. But it'd be interesting to start testing this around more with brand story, founder story level content, which is something we've done a little bit of, but don't have the data to hand. But yeah, seeing it work really well across lower funnel and like squeezing the juice.
The previous video to this on the channel and will have been the third party and partnership ads masterclass that I put out last week. So if you haven't watched that and you're watching this, go back and look at how to do those best in class, because I think there's one thing executing on an asset level, but it really works best if you pull that through the funnel, because conversion rate goes up, and again it supports signals and supports better asset delivery to new audience. I also think another KPI to touch on is like new visitor percentage. I think alongside CPMR, I think tracking new visitor percentage across an ad account holistically, but also asset format, like you mentioned, is just another way to really like get a data point on how your creative approach is influencing incrementality over time of spend.
Yep, agreed. That is the amount of people that actually land on site that are new, not necessarily, it doesn't capture anything to do with the creative itself. It's more, did this creative do a good job of getting new visitors onto the site, not necessarily engaging, which is why I think you need to look at CPMR and then also look at new visitor percentage, because it'll tell you if it's done a good job of both getting in new eyeballs, but getting them to actually go through to site as well, which you would expect if you had a strong click-through rate. But yeah, there's such a strong correlation between declining new visitor percentage and declining performance. So marry that up with incremental reach. And I think new visitor percentage is almost like a lagging indicator of rising CPMR, because if that's reducing, then you're obviously not getting enough new eyeballs into the funnel.
And then I feel like those are both a leading indicator of declining performance further down the line, because whenever we take on an account that's really struggling with incremental reach, it's a hard problem to solve initially, because you often have to focus on doing a lot of very different new things, which by default have a lower hit rate. Maybe you're tapping into completely new angles and personas, completely new ways of selling a product. And I feel like that it's so important to keep that as an always on work stream, because it's less predictable than those proven messaging frameworks, those proven ways of taking a product to market. And starting that from a standing start when you're in a position of low incremental reach or declining performance off the back of that, it can take a good couple of months to really turn an account around.
Yeah, I think going back to what we were saying at the start as well around that almost halo effect when you start really investing in this. I think if you don't have that halo effect right now, there are like really quick wins you can think about through more of a vehicle lens. I guess a varied vehicle can become part of a different persona unlock, because like different vehicles might appeal to different personas.
Just to touch on vehicle, when we're saying vehicle, we mean podcast ad or VSL or founder story. It's those like proven frameworks to deliver a message through. And like you said, it can be a quick win because you can take literally almost an identical script and just reproduce it in a way that's super visually diverse and therefore appeals to someone else's preference for content consumption, right?
Exactly that. Like some people are going to convert higher through a podcast ad, whereas someone might convert through a guy walking through a supermarket telling you about his amazing supplement. It's all relative to, like, I guess it comes back to what will emotionally resonate with someone, and that can help you unlock extra scale as well. TikTok's an amazing place to find inspiration for that. So I think like organic content especially, usually it comes with ease of creation versus something more high production led like a podcast. So there are easy quick wins you can do to get yourself started with this whole incremental reach idea. And it should just compound from there. And KPIs to measure that as well over time.
100%. I think organic, TikTok, and even looking at longer form YouTube, we've touched on this previously, and pulling, if you've got the budget, some of those more structured high prod like approaches to series, to content formats back into a direct response framework can work really, really well.
I was just going to ask you a question. How do you think people should be thinking about concept level variations to really maximize incremental reach? How should we be thinking about that? Because I think maybe, like you said, 12 months ago, it was very minutiae, the change. Whereas now it feels like we need to go much bigger swing with that initial message, that initial 3 seconds that we hook people in with. There's Dr. Squatch, I think, an amazing example of hook variations because it's visually completely different, but the body of the video is. So I think that's probably where my head goes, but it'd be good to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think visual diversification is one of, that's like the obvious is way, and like taking bigger swings there than previous. So maybe you go from like sitting in a car to first person to traditional UGC to supermarket, etc., etc. You can often reproduce. You can reproduce the assets visually in so many different ways in the similar creative format, and that will drive incremental delivery to a different audience. I also think you can do it through like framing. We've seen a couple of examples where we've like framed the ad differently. So one that comes to mind is where Lucas called out his mum as the target, but it was him in the asset rather than using someone over the age of 45 to produce that ad. And that's two different ways to, again, the message was very similar in those ads, but the way we presented it was very different. I also think a third one is like the way you present the product and like the psychological motivation and the way you present it on like from a buyer psychology perspective. One of our lead magnets had a real good deep dive into this and showed a few different statics around how we're doing this. Well, I feel like a good example would be like people who are more predisposed to loss versus gain is like an example. I can't remember the other ones. I need to. It's
like reframing a benefit. Almost. Yeah.
In a different way.
Yeah, because it's going to appeal to different. I heard a good quote on this the other day as well. I think it was like a Steve Jobs quote, to be honest. Just talking about mass variation of marketing angles that all ladder up to the same benefit, which is the point that you're getting at. I think that's key. I think creators is an interesting one. I'm not seeing as great performance through creator diversity as we were 6 months ago, which is fairly anecdotal. Don't have data to back that up. but it does feel like that full like visual journey that you take a user on needs to be the number one variable that differentiates a creative versus your last creative, not necessarily giving the same concept to briefed into two different creators. Like when I've seen a brand do that, it just hasn't hit like it did 6 months ago. And it's to your point at the start.
Yeah, I think unless you've got a really wide range of demographics and those creators are different genders, different ages, and often when you're doing that, they also have different sort of motivations and pain points. So it's kind of a combination of angle, persona, and creator differentiation rather than just one. But yeah, we've definitely seen that anecdotally play out over the last few months. It used to be a massive lever, I think, being more diverse in the individual that's delivering the message from a creative perspective.
Yeah. I mean, it's that whole shift from deterministic to probabilistic, right? I know we've been through this in previous episodes, but I truly believe like if you can just study the algorithm and how it works, you can build from there. And not enough people think about how to put yourself into a more favorable position by like truly understanding how an algorithm works. Like deterministic is if Y then X, whereas probabilistic is if X then maybe Y based on all the signals it had access to, rather than prior, where it's like, oh, this person added to cart, this person purchased, let's serve this ad to this person based on those actions that they've taken. So it's very if X then Y, whereas now it's like signals creating relevancy scores, ad gets delivered based on relevancy scores, and not enough people are talking about that and thinking through that lens when it comes to creative strategy.
I think there's the opportunity if you can really lean into it.
So you're running an e-commerce business, you've got a great product, your ads are finally hitting their stride, and then you look at the calendar and realize that Black Friday and Cyber Monday are right around the corner. But do you have enough cash to buy all of the inventory you need? Will you have enough in your ad budget to really maximize scale?
This is the exact moment so many founders hit a wall. They've tried the old school bank loan thing, weeks of paperwork and meetings, and then a rejection letter because their business is just too new. They've thought about going VC, but who wants to give up a piece of their company just to buy stock? That's what makes our partner, Waveflyer, such a game changer.
Waveflyer provides funding for e-commerce businesses just like yours, but here's the best part. It's non-dilutive. That means you get the cash you need to scale up, to buy more inventory, launch that new ad campaign, or hire a key team member without giving up a single percentage of your company.
And the process is incredibly fast. We're talking about a matter of days, not months. Their data-powered platform gives you personalized insights into your business's performance so you can make smarter decisions about your cash flow and marketing. Stop worrying about maxing out credit cards or getting bogged down by bank bureaucracy. Get the capital you need, seize the moments, and keep 100% of your business and get back to what you do best.
Check them out in the link in the description.
And I think we've saw off the back of the post that I put out, an individual from Meta, Jason, who is internal at Meta but shares quite a lot about their platform developments. We'll put his Twitter down below because I think it's a worthwhile follow if you're in the space to stay on top of this. He put out a tweet that announced the fact that Meta are launching 3 new metrics around creative in platform, and they all help you better have a better read of incrementality of asset delivery and better and hopefully provide metrics that can allow you to adjust creative strategy more intentionally around the signals you're getting from the channel that were previously unknown to us as advertisers. So the first is a creative fatigue report, which is just gives them a measure of like when the target audience is getting too saturated by a specific creative. So it's a percentage score of creative fatigue on an asset level. And it's going to give you a read of when the creative is getting less interaction as a result of that fatigue, and therefore you're starting to see declining performance. I think that's super interesting on an asset level because you could kind of see and feel that from a CPA perspective, but we never had data to provide us with like a leading indicator of that coming.
Yeah. It's almost, I think it's going to be a mixture of, it's probably like CPMR with a performance KPI like CPA on a time scale is the thing that's going to determine the strength of that as a as a measurement.
And yeah, if you're starting to see that tick up towards like 30-40% on a winning asset, probably puts a bit of urgency into you to be like, we need, if you're really reliant on a few ads and you're starting to see them fatigue, I think that again refocuses minds on speed of execution, volume into the ad account, and making sure that there's a lot of pace and quality across that work stream.
100%. I think you always should have, I mean, for some of our biggest brands, we've got like up to 50 high performers in an ASC. So we don't, when you get into this position where you've got so many top performers in a core ASC, you don't really have to worry about fatigue in the way that Ollie just described, because you know that if you have got an ad that's ready to substitute that from the previous sprint, then you know that spend's likely going to go there, because Meta is way smarter than us and knows where to distribute spend. But if you are in a position where you've only got like 3 of those and they're all rising, then yeah, it's danger zone.
Yeah, it's like it's risk, right? It's risk of just of performance being significantly impacted at some point in the future if we're not able to find those winners. Second of these was creative similarity. So that's going to provide you a view of when assets visually are too similar. So what we mentioned earlier about the report that Meta provided us in this workshop, that's going to be surfaced in the ad account, and it's going to tell you directly when Andromeda is seeing 2 assets as the same. And I think that's just going to be, when that lands in accounts, I think it's going to be super eye-opening to just go through and just see what Andromeda is scoring as visually or asset levels similar, and therefore impeding new reach and grouping that to the same audience.
Wonder if how they're going to define that is going to get more and more like strict, like if diversity is going to become more and more important based on how they create that create the overlap just now. But yeah, I mean, do we have any indication of like what warrants the actual differentiation? It's like more of how punchy the visual is, and I guess if it's a video, then it's the actual messaging of the video that's taken in by the AI and it's analyzed it from there. But yeah, I think the best thing you can do is hedge your bets on the fact that it needs to look visually completely different, and the narrative of the video, if it's a video, needs to be massively varied as well. If not, then you're going to see your similarity score shoot through the roof.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. And then the final one, which I almost feel is like perhaps the most interesting of the 3, is like this idea of top creative themes. So understanding the number of active ads and amount of spend across key creative themes. So think humor, nostalgia, savings or offer, and social proof, etc. And I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about. It's another layer, I guess. It's like we're talking angle, we're talking theme, we're talking vehicle, especially when you start talking about humor, nostalgia, as those satire. We've talked about that in previous episodes as something that often over indexes in top performers is satire and humor. But not all brands lean into that. It's kind of saying that we need to be covering a lot of different presentations of ads in tone as well, which is interesting. And getting a real read on that will be will probably firstly help spot gaps, but also maybe spot where you're over indexing in production. Like social proof being an obvious one where people do a lot of like review, testimonial. Ads, and perhaps it's like enough is enough if we've already got that bucket covered to a high level.
Feels like that's Meta just trying to make Instagram, Facebook a way more, just a better experience for their users, because they're going to reward you if you create a better experience and invest more into themes. If it's like satire, for example, we've been doing that already through the likes of Triple where you break down the buckets of angles, but very little done it on a theme level. So it's going to be super interesting to see what the UI looks like for that and what metrics they attach to each theme. For example, are we going to get the granularity of incremental reach, for example? We're going to be able to see that over time. But yeah, looking forward to that for sure.
It's interesting what the role of brand takes within all of this, because like brand, by definition, from a creative perspective, has a high degree of similarity. If you look at if you roll back 12 to 18 months and look at AG1 as a creative example, like you could look at AG1's ad library and it had a brand look and feel throughout every single asset. I could put one of their ads in front of you without the identity, and you could probably tell me that it was from their brand due to the theme, due to the consistency. But if Meta's saying that consistency and similarity is a negative for growing through their channel, those brands that are more protective and less open to diversity are probably going to have a harder time. And again, it's felt like this anecdotally for the last 12 to 18 months, thinking about clients that we work with that are more brand protective because that's what makes their business valuable, what it is to the consumer. But I think that's going to be a very interesting challenge to overcome for those businesses to get the most out of Meta in this ecosystem.
Yeah. It's a really good thought. It's a really interesting one. And we've definitely seen that over the last 6 months. More brand protective equals harder to differentiate. So I think brands that are more brand protective need to really figure out a solution to that sooner rather than later, because it is going to get harder and harder to see consistent returns when we're going into a diversity-centric algorithm.
I use AG1 as an example because I've looked in their ad library more recently, and there's a lot of color differentiation and diversity in comparison to where they were previously. And I don't think it's impossible to balance those two things still. It's harder. It needs more intention. You probably need to lean into more vehicles and high prod more. And yeah, it is just going to probably be a little bit more difficult to drive incremental reach unless you really been super intentional with that process.
Yeah, it's also just remembering like what the word brand means, and to me, it's like the look, it's the feeling that you create in the user's mind when they see the brand. And again, first principles, you can take that, and the answer to that doesn't need to be less diversity. It can be more diversity, but wrap your value proposition under that, the thing that makes you guys special. Think about that more, not necessarily like the visual aspect. Think about what feeling you want to be created in the customer's mind when they see your brand, not necessarily how you look when you come across.
Yeah.
More about the feeling you want to invoke.
100%. I also think this leads into a piece on, unless do you want to touch on anything else on that topic before I segue? Let's segue. It's also like where does it end, right? Where does that creative requirement end? You can see this like path, like we're making for some of our clients hundreds and hundreds of ads a month, and they're our top spenders. I expect, when I had a conversation around forecasting for a couple of brands over the last few weeks, and they're planning to double spend on Meta into next year, and average spend per asset, it's hard to retain average spend per asset as you grow creative volume. And therefore it's just a bit overwhelming when you think about how many ads that are really required to get what we want from Meta and consistently drive that growth. And I guess that brings back into focus the role of AI in driving asset cost and volume as we move into 2026, and the greater role that we're seeing that play. And obviously we've seen Sora 2 drop since we last had probably seen about 15 different AI advancements drop over the last
big
3 months. It has. It's anxiety inducing in some ways.
Levels through the roof. But
yeah, obviously Sora landed frustratingly as always in the UK. We're
miles behind.
We're miles behind. Even in the EU, I feel sorry for them because they're even further behind. But we've managed to get access through Josh, who's built as a little API platform to start playing with the platform. But yeah, what have your thoughts on Sora been since having a play?
Yeah, I used it quite a bit yesterday morning, and it has not disappointed. It is very, very good for a few reasons that I've got noted down here. Speed. It's fast. It's a lot faster than VO3. Probably twice as fast from comparing them anecdotally. Don't have data. It's cheaper as well. It's probably like half the cost when you look at the amount of credits that you use through VO3 and compare it to the API usage. It's a lot cheaper to use. In terms of the actual like content itself that it's producing, because to get your thoughts on this, but as well, but it feels like it's way better at producing UGC content. It's more like the realism of it, the speed of it, how the camera pans, how it like layers different parts of the video together. That for me has been quite a big standout so far.
Yeah, the thing that blows my mind about the app, because we're using the API key, but there's obviously the app, the consumer app that we haven't been fortunate to get access here in the UK, but I've watched a lot of videos, and you go on and you say 3 numbers and it instantly matches your voice. And then you record a video of your face and it instantly can pick up your likeness. And that is just crazy. It's crazy. It's so good at generating people and individuals and retaining quality. It's also really good at, from an upper body shot, getting proportions right, which is nuts.
Based on like your face shape, and you probably understands your
shoulder
body
width and like it's
body fat percentage from like your cheek, like your.
I don't know how it does it, but it's crazy. It's just a massive leap forward in quality and speed and efficiency, I guess you'd call it, from a cost and turnaround time perspective.
Yeah. I think that's key to making it like production ready as well. To like mass adoption is speed and efficiency, because to create a really good ad, you've got to go through multiple rounds of revision and like output multiple variations to pick something good of. And if each part of a video is costing you a lot of money, that's going to soon add up. And if it's slow to do that as well, it's not going to get adoption quickly. But it's still early days in video gen ultimately.
It's just, and the thing that's really difficult to kind of think about is like, there's a VO 3.1 or VO 4 coming. I imagine, I would assume that's going to be even higher quality than Sora, based on the quality of VO 3 relative to the previous OpenAI models and the context that YouTube is to Google.
It's got to be.
And it's, I feel like timelines are compressing on AI becoming a very large percentage of asset creation and production.
Yeah.
And just the speed of output and development is rapidly increasing. So yeah, I assume that obviously we were making a lot of ads with VO3, not full creatives, but they were playing a growing role in asset production. I assume this is just going to drive another step change in that. And VO 3.1 is going to drive another step change in that. And I do think there's a world by the end of next year where probably over 50% of creative that we produce is heavily AI driven.
Might even say sooner.
Yeah, maybe even sooner.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really standing out to me over the last, since Nano Banana dropped and then Sora, is I guess you'd call it remixing, like taking something and putting it in a different environment or context, which is basically what Sora's doing. When it gets your face, it can then remix it into a completely different context. It feels like that's the thing that's really advancing. I think that's key, because it removes AI slop, just making things up based on what it's got access to across the internet, to actual real things. And product placement is obviously a massive part of that, which is why I do think it's going to come around very, very quickly.
Yeah. Interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, we also had like the update from OpenAI. We've had about 9,000 updates from OpenAI since we last did a solo episode. The big one for commerce is obviously the Shopify integration and the integration with Stripe to make checkout native to their platform, which I think is exciting in many ways, because I think it's another channel of distribution for brands, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
Allows you to meet your customers in a place that they're transacting and discovering products, and that point of discovery and point of transaction becomes like seamless, right? It's all in one location.
That's what OpenAI are trying to do, right? Just take over the internet.
Yeah, it's like redefining what the internet is, right? With the way
I guess generative engine optimization, and just the ability to get like hyper personalized products within a chat interface is going to be really interesting to see. It's like right now, nobody really thinks about boring stuff, but like in your Shopify metadata and really defining that down to the blend of fabric, for example, or the like fit on your collar. It's like not many people actually define that, but when Shopify is sending this data to OpenAI, that's exactly what it's going to pick up on, because if there's anyone that knows you like you, it's AI right now, and it's going to be able to ingest that and serve you products that are just incredibly personalized.
Yeah, it's that feed optimization, I think, is going to be really important for that, and doing it in natural language rather than optimizing for Google, where you're like calling something that's blue a completely crazy midnight XYZ color.
Yeah.
I think redefining or like setting, like re-optimizing towards the way that people actually interact with it with AI through natural language is going to be an interesting transition that brands need to go through. I do think that and Sora, like Sora 2's download rate, that I think it could have probably eclipsed TikTok's growth if they hadn't rate limited it. I dread to think how much power they're draining through with the amount of content that's being produced on that platform right now. It's like,
I think I was looking at, I think it was, they capped it really small, much smaller than I thought. I think it was like 250,000 users on the first day.
Invite only,
which is nothing. Yeah, I would expect. I was bearish the other day when you said it could be bigger than TikTok, but then after going deeper into it, I'm like, yeah, it's got a chance.
Yeah, I think if they hadn't rate limited downloads, I think it would have had like gone bananas in those first days, because I think it's driven by like humor, and it's the first, I was listening to another podcast where they said it's the first time AI has been peer-to-peer. So like you can interact with mates on that channel. You can send each other funny videos that then pulls someone else into the platform in the way that Facebook did with tagging photos. I think that was My First Million I was listening to. And that creates like compounding growth and exponentiality from a social app.
Yep.
So I think when they remove the rate limiter, I just think it's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
It's also like they're diversifying across so many different things. Like they're doing App Store, they're doing this, they're doing Agent Builder. The commerce and Sora surely breeds an ad network next, right? It's got to. Everything becomes an ad platform eventually.
Of course. Yeah, just imagine the sheer amount that they are learning, even from getting the third-party tools integrated into the chat interface. I forgot what it's called now. Toolkit or something. Like Canva, Figma, learning how people use softwares that aren't their own. They are now learning like how people use Zapier, Canva. It's like, yeah, what could they build off the back of that? Just literally taking over.
It's crazy. So yeah, I think that there's an ad network coming. I don't know what it'll look like, but it'll be
AI slop.
Yeah.
I'm all for it though.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's exciting because with any new like method of distribution, there's a massive arbitrage opportunity, right? And it's just interesting to see where attention goes. I think if you're selling to people under the age of sort of 35, I think you need to be really thinking and engaging with these new methods of product discovery. Yeah. Because I think that's the demographic that are ultimately using these tools the most. If you're selling to someone over the age of sort of 40, then I think Meta, some of these more traditional channels are still going to be the core growth levers in the medium term. But it's going to be interesting to see how that like split progresses over time.
Yeah. If you think the Meta algorithm's good, wait till you see the OpenAI algo when it knows way more about you than Meta does. Yeah. It literally has been listening to you talk to it for the past 24 months about your deepest desires and your biggest weaknesses. It knows all of that now, and it's going to use that to its advantage.
Start producing product recommendations for you. We obviously went to the Meta exec day, and that was interesting to see their wearables advancements, and that's obviously OpenAI. I've got Johnny Ive in there producing their products. It's interesting to see what that'll be. But I think that wearables thing, what really like interested me about their developments in wearables was like battery life, and like the idea that if you wore those Ray-Bans enough, the AI would then have so much more context on you. Like it's like you already tell it a lot, but then it can listen and see. Like, are they porting that into the model? I imagine they are. Like,
I would.
Yeah. So it's just like how, Yeah, crazy to think about.
That is the new UI, right? That's going to be the default UI in like 20 years. Is the idea of like Meta's core premise is like the idea of a keyboard and a mouse and a big screen where you're stuck in one room and you can't connect with people is probably gone, where it could be on your face, outdoors, you can connect with people but still like immerse yourself into the digital world. I do love that idea, and I do think it will it'll start picking up some momentum. It's like obviously the Google glasses failed
It's too early
because it was way too early, whereas this, people are really warming up to the idea of it now.
Yeah, that next development in the way that we interface with the digital world, which I think is really interesting, and I'm sure it'll breed many opportunities, but it's also kind of scary.
More anxiety.
Did you have any more? Wanted to finish with some like quick fire tactics.
Yes.
Obviously we've been heads down in preparation for Black Friday, experimenting a lot across our client base. Wanted to get some insights from yourself, being more in the weeds of like any quick wins or things you've really seen drive performance for brands currently.
Yes. Been pretty in the weeds of the last couple of weeks, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I've got a couple of things that I wanted to share with the audience. So first one is, this is an interesting one. It's like more around the idea of horizontal scale as well as vertical. It's like something that we've invested a lot into is heavy vertical scale, going like really deep into one campaign, super high budget, but not going as hard on horizontal scale. I'm seeing us come away from that now naturally, because I think surface area is becoming really important. And I think with Andromeda, the whole algorithm, you're putting yourself in a position where you can tap into different audience pools. And I think that's what horizontal scale allows you to do. So what I'm seeing work really well right now is every creative sprint, not only promoting that into your core environment, but getting that into something with a manual bid constraint, and do that on a weekly cycle. But if you time it just before the weekend, that weekend can be maximized, because it's obviously when your estimated action rates are going to be through the roof. And we've been getting into the habit of doing that for a client, and it's been working really, really well. And weekends are just compounding with performance. And that works really well if you do weekly or bi-weekly creative sprints. So that idea of surface area is really working well for us right now. And I think that's a great learning at this time of year going into Black Friday, Cyber Monday. That's number one.
I think that plays nicely into, like, we talked about how this redefinition of Andromeda creative similarity should change your creative strategy, but then it's how does that ladder down to your ad account setup? And we've seen that, like, we've seen limitations when we've got a super consolidated structure at scale, because we're not getting that diversity delivery. So it's like breaking out by persona, breaking out ASCs by persona is like, once you've got that creative process working, that can be a big win, right? Which is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. And another one that kind of leans into Andromeda, where this time last year it wasn't as big of a thing. Same with maybe start of this year, if you were on the older campaign setups before ASC, I think it's a really good idea to take some of your previous winners and put them into a bid cap with the new ASC algorithm. Just done that last week, and yeah, it's doing it. So that's a very in the weeds tactic to do now. Mentioned partnership ads with native Instagram story statics. Literally looks organic. Do that if you're not already. Another one might be a hot take, but it'd be good to get your thoughts on this. Not turning ads off in non-testing campaigns. There's obviously caveats to that. The last time I turned an ad off in a campaign that was a scaling campaign was probably early last month, over like 30 days ago. And that's because, like I was saying earlier, if you're getting into that mass diversity in an ad account and you've got a campaign with tons of really high performing assets, you can trust in Meta to allocate spend in the best possible places at a given time. And you'll see over time, it kind of trends back and forth between different assets. I think that's more relative to like demand, maybe persona demand, things like that. But that's an interesting one that I've seen working well. And I guess it's just trusting in Meta, and something I've always believed in is just like, it's just so much smarter than you. It knows exactly what to do. Just give it the right context.
Yeah, I also think that plays into like that idea of the long tail becoming more effective. So if you've proven those assets work, you put them in the scaling campaign, but maybe they are getting something else is outperforming them at that moment, that may not hold forever. That may exhaust that asset may get exhausted across that audience, and you want that security of other assets to kind of pick up that burden. But you'd also, hypothesis would be like, as Andromeda gets better, the whole average, like the long tail of those ads should just automatically spend more, and you're able to spend more across that campaign holistically.
Yeah. It's almost like a cascading sort of thing. So every week it just
trickle down effect almost.
Yeah, exactly. And then I am finding it's taking, for brand new campaigns and ad sets, I'm finding it's taking Meta a little bit longer to learn versus what it was 6 months ago, which is interesting. Don't have a hypothesis yet, but the thing that I'm seeing do well right now is even more consolidation on an ad set creative testing level, and just letting them sit for at least a week, not getting too impatient there. And the reason why you consolidate with that is because you reduce the chances of your ad spend going into more inefficient ads, whereas consolidated more ads to work with, more places that they can spend through if they're high performing. And then past that point is when you enter that like optimization window, where then it's like going down the horizontal and vertical scaling route. If you time it well, you can obviously maximize the weekend. So see it all as like a really nice system working together. If you're in that sprint cycle, promotion cycle, and you do that week in, week out, and it will compound over time. So yeah, there's my tactics of the week.
Nice. And I think it just made me think about this, but I think another thing that we've seen over the last sort of 3 months across our business, and we've been doing a lot of work on it operationally and from a quality perspective, but I think high production just continues to grow as a percentage of spend. So if I could give one piece of advice to brands watching, if maybe you've tested high production before and it's not worked, or maybe you're just doing UGC and statics, I would encourage you to find a way to build that into your creative production workflow, either ahead of Black Friday, maybe that's too late now, but certainly ahead of going into next year, because it's our fastest growing asset format as a percentage of ad account spend. And I think it over indexes a lot, similarly to like problem aware and unaware ads, it over indexes in driving significant change in incremental reach in accounts.
Yeah. I would even say if high production hasn't worked for you, it's not because of high production, it's because it was probably a poor, you didn't go through the process of understanding the persona and the angle and wrapped it in a really strong script. That's why it didn't work. It's not because high production doesn't work. So 100% agree.
Stripped and execution for sure.
Yeah.
And I think Lucas will be coming back in next week to really dive deep into some of the like nitty gritty creative tactics that we've been experimenting with over the last couple of months to drive some of those unlocks in accounts. Do you have anything you wanted to touch on before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think we're good. I think that's a wrap.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thank you all for listening. Thank you for coming on, Sam, again. I'm sure you'll be back very soon. And yeah, if you've stuck around till the end, please, as always, drop us a like, drop us a subscribe. We've got a couple of big guests coming up through the remainder of Q4, and many more tactical episodes that you can take and hopefully implement into your ad account ahead of 2026. So thanks for listening.